everyone, and welcome back to Coachy TV. This is going to be a video talking about the two different areas that you need to develop an athlete's VO2 max. Their central VO2 max versus their peripheral VO2 max. So let's go ahead and get right to it. I am Kyle Giacono. I'm the head boys cross country and track coach at Wharton High School in Tampa, Florida, and I have been for the last 6 years. If you want to see my credentials, they are on the screen. So overall, what is VO2 max? This is a term that's tossed around a lot by distance coaches, but it's really important to have a very solid understanding of what overall an athlete's VO2 max is. And that is their ability to maximally use oxygen. So it's the workout intensity in which anything faster or more intense than it, and they can no longer provide any more energy aerobically. If they're going to go more of an intense pace than this particular threshold, then it has to come from the anaerobic system. VO2 max is typically expressed in terms of milliliters of oxygen consumed per kilogram of body weight per minute, in terms of doing a scientific test, not a field test or getting the velocity at which their body reaches VO2 max. So this is the way you would do it in a lab if you were to hook somebody up to, they'd get on a treadmill or a bike and they would have a mask on, and it would sort of it would figure out exactly how much oxygen they're using per minute. Just for comparison's sake, here's a few different animals and where both trained and untrained humans fall into place. An untrained human is the same as a pig, but we can double a human's VO2 max with training, which is very interesting. The right type of training can more than double a person's normal VO2 max. And then here are some really workhorse type animals in terms of doing a lot of work over an extended period of time. The hummingbird almost off the charts because of how much energy they have to produce over such a long period of time in the way that it flies. And again, humans before we get trained are very much like pigs, but we can double our ability. So we need to get our body to have the best VO2 max so that we can run better and faster aerobic paces so that we can run for longer at faster paces. Because as we mentioned, anything faster than VO2 max, and the human body can only supply it anaerobically. And anaerobic energy production comes with some very, very negative consequences. It's very energy expensive, and it also causes lactic acid to accumulate in your body. If you missed our video that talks about the importance of VO2 max that was released yesterday, I would take a look at that in the description down below. It also has a link to the video that I posted a little bit ago on how to test and use someone's VO2 max and use it to create workout paces. So what exactly are the differences between developing somebody's central VO2 max or the peripheral VO2 max, these two development areas? So central VO2 max deals with moving oxygen from the athlete's heart outward. Okay, so getting it from where it's going from the lungs into the blood and moving outward. So these are the adaptations that allow for this to be increased and the way in which you would train it. So one of the biggest things that comes with central VO2 max development is getting a bigger heart, or most specifically the left ventricle, the actual pump of the heart that sends the blood outward. This is trained through both aerobic threshold or easy pace and lactic threshold or tempo pace. If you missed our video on these two workout types, they're also in the description down below. Decreased resting heart rate, same basic thing. Decreasing somebody's resting heart rate is going to basically just show that they're working less intensively when they're not exercising. So it's more of an indicator than truly something that's going to help them in race performance. Increased stroke volume and cardiac output, which basically is tied in with moving blood out of the heart, and then also you're going to have increased overall blood flow. Also, these are trained with aerobic threshold and lactic threshold running. Increased blood volume, so you're going to have more blood, and the composition is going to be improved. You're going to have more ability to hold oxygen on the blood. It's going to be better for an endurance athlete. Again, same type of modalities, aerobic threshold, lactic threshold. And increased capillaries. With this type of work, your body is going to increase the amount of blood vessels that are going through the working muscle so that you can move more oxygen. So at the beginning of a training year, you might have a very lesser trained athlete that has maybe two capillaries per muscle fiber. You might even double that in one training year. Now it's not going to double every single training year, but you might get another 1 or 2 capillaries for each training year, and that's just going to be that much more blood moving to the working muscle. All of these central VO2 max developments come with aerobic threshold or lactic threshold running. Just a little bit more about these two. Aerobic threshold running and lactic threshold running should be done continuously, okay, for at least 20 minutes. after somebody's in shape, meaning not the first week of the season, you're only going to have these improvements after 20 minutes. Your heart's going to release a protein-like hormone that allows for all of these above central VO2 max adaptations to happen. Aerobic threshold work should be 65 to 70% of VVO2 max, and lactic threshold should be 78 to 85% of VVO2 max, or the velocity at which your body reaches VO2 max. If you want a complete detailed video on how to actually calculate those things, go ahead and click in the description down below for testing VO2 max. Now, you want to, again, improve all of this because part of the problem that humans have is we just do not store oxygen. We're really good at storing fat. We can do that for weeks on end. We can store about 2 hours worth of carbohydrates in the form of glycogen, and then your body starts to convert that into fat. And that's sort of the idea behind things like low-carb diets is people don't want to convert more of this, but they also, if you're doing a lot of high-intensity work, you need carbohydrates, obviously. We can also store about 2-3 days maybe worth of water under really good conditions or situations, but we can only have enough oxygen for about 3 minutes without taking a breath, which is a really good thing because oxygen is very corrosive and we wouldn't live very long if we could store oxygen. And obviously under normal circumstances, you're never going 3 minutes without taking a breath. So this is why we have to improve this, because under normal situations, your body is not going to move a lot of oxygen. This is why we have to train this and get the oxygen from the heart into the blood and out to the working muscles. That's what all central VO2 max development is about, is moving more oxygen outward from the heart. Now, peripheral VO2 max, okay, this deals with actually getting the blood that is now away from the heart and at the working muscles, but actually getting your working muscles to extract it from the blood, which is actually more important because it really doesn't matter if the blood can get from your heart to your working muscles, but if the working muscles cannot extract it from the blood, then it really doesn't matter. So let's look at some of these peripheral VO2 max adaptations. The biggest one are these first two, the increased myoglobin content in working muscles. If you think of hemoglobin is what holds oxygen on your blood. Myoglobin is the same thing in your working muscles. It is what, as the blood comes by, it grabs onto the oxygen and takes it into the working muscles. Only myoglobin can do that, which is very similar in terms of your body increasing its ability to extract oxygen in terms of its overall capabilities. These are both trained with what's called aerobic power or VO2 max style workouts. These are very high intensity workouts done right at current date pace 2 mile intensity. You also have increased aerobic enzyme activity, so the actual aerobic enzymes that are inside the working muscle, you're going to have more of them and they're going to be more active. As well as the fact that in the working muscles, you're going to have increased mitochondria surface size, number, and surface area. And this is actually important because this is where the ability to produce energy aerobically happens in the mitochondria. So these are all things that we want inside the working muscle once they've pulled out the oxygen from the capillaries. These are actually done at aerobic threshold, lactic threshold pace too, just like we were talking about over here with these modalities. You really are not going to get development of these two at aerobic power. And in fact, you're going to have a little bit of a stunting of mitochondria development when you do aerobic power workouts. It's one of the reasons why you wouldn't do more than one of these per microcycle. Mitochondria, while they use acid for their own aerobic energy, or for their own aerobic energy production, it's a really interesting situation. I'll do a whole video on this. But if it gets to be too much acid, to where it's not able to, the mitochondria can't use it for its own energy and convert it into something else, they end up dying off or living much less of a long time in your working muscles, and that's actually counterproductive. So actually you will not get increased mitochondria surface number, size, number, and surface area at aerobic power, but even though it is using these same modalities, it's part of the peripheral VO2 max because it's all about the energy that's happening outside or away from your heart or the center of you. So aerobic power workouts should be done as intervals or repetitions, and if you didn't see our video series on aerobic power, that is also in the description down below. And you can also develop aerobic power with tests or just overall longer races. You're not really going to get aerobic power development in an 800 or a 1600. It really needs to be a 3200 meter or a 5K. And aerobic power workouts need to be at 98 to 102% of current date pace of VVO2 max. Very high intensity work. But none of that really matters if it doesn't translate to actual performance on the track or on the course. Some people might say, I don't really need to do any of this. I'm coaching more 800 or 1600 meter kids and we're more into speed. Well, this is a very interesting chart to take a look at and factor in when you're planning out this training. Why VO2 max matters. So this is based on Endurance Event Race Win Predictor. This was a study done by Ingham in 2008. It's a little bit old, but it still has held up over time with further testing. So if you're a high school coach, you're pretty much not going to be dealing with the 10,000. This is going to be for college age men or professional cross country runners in the World Championships and World Juniors. Running economy is the biggest indicator of who wins these races. And I go over this in detail in my video on the importance of VO2 max in the description down below. But this is more about tempo pace. If you're a high school coach, and even college coaches, most of these events are going to be in that area too, you're going to be dealing with everything below the 10K in track and in cross country, and these are very important in terms of your VO2 max development. The 5K, it's almost a certainty. The person that had the better VO2 max during this very long study that was done, that was concluded in 2008, almost 95% of the time, who had the better VO2 max won the 5K. This is almost a sure thing. Some things can obviously happen. It's not 100%, but it's as close to 100% as you can get in terms of athletic competition. The 1500, even though it's shorter, the VO2 max over running economy was actually a higher indicator of who won. Now, running economy in this study was tested with a 4.5 mile tempo run. If you want to see the study again, look up Ingham 2008, and you can see exactly the way they did it because they spelled it out. But VO2 max over running economy, even better indicator than just VO2 max in the 5K. And if you just looked at VO2 max in terms of the 1500, a very short middle distance race, 91% is still a pretty good indicator of who's going to win that race. And even as short as this is, the 800, when you combine VO2 max to running economy, 94.1% VO2 max. So this is why it's important to train all of these different things with your athlete throughout the year, both their central VO2 max and their peripheral VO2 max. You have to improve both of those things. You need regular work at both aerobic lactic threshold continuous and aerobic power, either as intervals, repetitions, or in tests and races, in order to get your athlete to move their VO2 max. If you just move central and you don't help them to extract the oxygen from the blood, it's not going to make a difference, and vice versa. If you're not doing these long continuous runs, it doesn't matter if you can extract oxygen because your body can't move it nearly as well. Now, the 3,200 meter, for those of you that are looking at this maybe in the track season, 2 mile in terms of high school, this wasn't part of the study because this was more professional and semi-professional type athletes. But since the 3,200 meter is basically VO2 max pace, I would assume if it was included in the study that it would have been at least as high of a win indicator, if not maybe a little bit more than the 5K, simply because of the nature of that race. So, if you like this video, maybe think about liking or subscribing or commenting down below. If you have any ideas for videos in the future, I'm probably going to take a step away from some aerobic type conditioning videos and start looking at some strength runs, like some different hill workouts here over the next week. Again, if you like this video, please like or subscribe to the channel. Until next time, this has been Coach